I really believe that God is really wanting to get the attention of us here recently. And, Mark talked about a lot of the things that we've been talking about, and there's been hard messages we've been talking about, haven't they? Haven't they been kind of hard? I know it's hard for me to deliver it, and I'm sure same goes with Mark, the things that God's got him talking about, but. I believe we're at war, and I believe that the enemy is out to get us any way he can. And that's what a lot of that altar call this morning was about. And if the enemy can't get you to disown God and get you to sin and do things like that, one thing he can do is he can distract you. He can distract you. And I want to talk about some of those distractions today, because what was mentioned earlier was what happened in Washington D.C. last night, and it's I read that, read some pastors' responses to that and what's going on, and everyone's saying the same thing. We don't live in the same world that we used to. Things are different now. I mean, you can feel it. There is a shaking going on. And if we're not careful, it's real easy for us to get our attention off of the eternal things and put them on the temporal things, the things around us, the things that are going to be shaken, the things that are going to change. And so I want to talk about today treasure in heaven. And I want to talk about where we are to be placing our focus. And you guys okay with that? Okay, well, let's start. Matthew chapter 6. We got a new thing up here that Chris found for us. I got a little feedback that I go through the scriptures too fast, and you guys have trouble keeping up with me. So Chris, Mark, and I talked about it, and Chris came up with this solution. So thank you, Chris. All right, so Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 19. Do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, this passage occurs in what is called the Sermon on the Mount, and that is Matthew 5 through 7. Those 3 chapters are the longest recorded sermon that Jesus preached, and it covers a lot of what it means to be a follower of Christ. And if you really want to study that, read Matthew 5 through 7. You'll get straight from Jesus' mouth the kind of heart that you need to have, the kind of discipline that you need to have to be a follower of Jesus. So in this passage, in Matthew 6, what he's talking about is the concept of living beyond the life that we see here. That's what he's talking about. He uses the analogy of treasure. And there are 2 treasures that he talks about: earthly treasure and heavenly treasure. The earthly treasure is, I get it now, but it won't last. The heavenly treasure is, it's not immediate, but it's eternal. So these are the 2 treasures that Jesus is talking about. And I kind of liken it to a retirement fund. Now, when you save for retirement, you're supposed to start when you're young, saving for retirement, and it's like sending money into the future. It's taking money and sending it into the future, because there's going to be a day, or at least we hope there'll be a day, when you can stop working and use that money to live on during retirement. And so what you're doing is you're taking what's now, sending it off into the future. Now, when you're young, retirement seems like it's a long way away. I remember that. And I also remember when we were young, money was kind of hard to come by. It was a lot more difficult, and it was hard to put money back because you're thinking, man, I sure could use that for that washer right now. But those that discipline themselves reap a reward when retirement comes, when it comes to that. But those that spend that through the years on the things that they need without putting money into retirement, without investing it, once they get to retirement, they may not be able to retire. It's just one of those things, and I know a few people like that, and that'd be a tough place to be. But see, this is what Jesus is saying. He's saying, lay up treasure in heaven. Don't exhaust all your resources here in things that are passing. All right? Rather, invest in things that will last. So I've got three questions I'm going to answer today. One of them is, how do we lay up treasure in heaven? The second one is, can we lose that treasure? And the third one is, what is the treasure? Okay? So with the first question, how do we lay up treasure? The answer I always land on whenever I think about laying up treasure in heaven is kind of the default, and that would be, well, here's what I do. I donate money, right? I give an offering in church. All right? We don't really do that. I guess we have a little bucket back there. But so that's kind of the default and the things that you think about. And I think that's part of it. I think it's part of it, but I think there's also way more to it, and this is what I want to focus on today. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 12 through 15 says, "Now if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become clear." So this is Paul talking to the Corinthians, and he is kind of talking about the same concept here, okay? So each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he will receive a reward, and if anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss. But he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. So Paul describes 6 investments in the kingdom of God: gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, and straw. Six different elements, all right? 6 different investments. And he says they are revealed in the day. Now, what is the day? Anybody know what the day is? It's the judgment. It's the judgment. There will be a day we all stand before God. It's like the sheep and the goats. We all stand before him and we give an account for our lives. So this is the day, and our works will be revealed in that day. And he says it's going to be revealed through fire. Now, I don't know what that looks like, but that's what he says is going to happen. Now, there are 2 categories of these 6 elements. One category is flammable. The other category is inflammable. All right? Now, the flammable items are wood, hay, and straw. Okay? Now, those symbolize earthly endeavors. Okay? Now, these are the things that are temporary. They grow for a while, right? You think of wood, it's a tree, it grows. Some trees get older than we do. It grows for a while, but then it is harvested. Hay, straw, We know what those are. Those are grasses, right? And then those two are harvested, right? Those are harvested. So they all die. And what are they used for? Mostly fuel. Fuel. So the hay and straw will be used for, sometimes you feed them to animals, right? So that's fuel for animals. Wood can be used for fire. I know we've got a wood stove, and man, we feed that wood stove in the wintertime, and everybody's distracted by my grandson, including myself, and especially my wife. But if take a minute and drink to my grandson coming in. All right. But we put the wood in the stove, and you're constantly feeding it, and the wood just disappears quickly, right? That's just how it goes. So these three elements, wood, hay, and straw, temporary things. They will not last. They're used for fuel. They're burned up. All right? Now, verse 15 of 1 Corinthians chapter 3, it says, if anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. You know, when I read that sentence, I picture some guy stumbling into heaven, and he's covered in soot, and he's, got smoke coming off his head, and he's like, oh, I made it. I made it. I don't want to be that guy. But he says he'll suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. And so there are those elements that can be burned away. And then there's the non-flammable: gold, silver, and precious stones. Now these are lasting materials that cannot be burned, but when they are introduced to fire, when they are introduced to heat, something happens in them. All right? So the precious stones, if you think about precious stones, what's the most precious stone that we can think of? A diamond. A diamond. So a diamond is formed, and the other stones are, but they are formed through pressure and heat. Pressure and heat will cause other elements to turn into these stones, all right? And they're called precious stones. Gold and silver, similarly, they are a metal, but gold and silver, how are they formed? They're melted together, or not them together, but they are melted down, and then all of the impurities come to the top, and then they are taken off the top. And so they're purified through that heat process. Does this all make sense to you guys? All right, so the fire that they pass through refines them rather than consuming them. So if there's an easy lesson that we can glean from this, is that our faithfulness in the midst of hardship. Anybody going through hardship? Anybody? Show of hands. 3 or 4? Probably most of us going through hardship. It not only strengthens us for the journey here, but it also yields an eternal benefit. You guys see that? You see that? So those elements, the ones that can get burned away versus the ones that cannot get burned away. The ones that cannot get burned away will continue to be refined as we go through this life, as we go through the struggles that we go through. Galatians 6:9 says this, let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. All right, so can you lose your treasure? Well, let's talk about something. Let's talk about the story of the prodigal son. And I'm going to paraphrase the first part of the story, and then we'll jump in with scripture at the end. So the story of the prodigal son, there's a man, he's got two sons. You guys may be familiar with the story. He's got two sons. Both of them are set to inherit a portion of everything that he owns upon his death. They will inherit that. Okay? So they're working for him. They're building his operation. They're building his farm. They're working toward it. Well, one son gets impatient and he says, "Hey, I want my share now." And so the father says, "Okay, you get your share now." So I don't know what they did. They probably sold off some land. He gathered some cash, gave it all to his son. His son says, "Thanks," goes off, travels to a foreign land, and he blows all the money, partying, buying prostitutes, doing anything he can think of, and he blows through the money. Suddenly, now he's off in a foreign land, doesn't have any cash. He has to go work for a pig farmer. He's working for the pig farmer, and he sees the pigs are eating better than he is because he's so broke, he just can't afford a decent meal. And he decides, I'm going to go home, and I'm just going to go to my dad and see if he'll hire me as a servant. At least then I'll eat some decent food when I go do that. So he makes the journey back home. His dad is looking out. His dad sees him coming over the horizon. He runs to him. They greet. This is a great story. He runs to him. They greet, they embrace. His father puts a ring on his finger, puts a robe on him, and he says, "Let's kill the fatted calf. We're going to have a party." He's back home. Okay? You guys follow that story? Okay, so all of that's going on. Now you have a brother that's been faithful. The brother is out there. He sees all the commotion. He says, "What's going on?" "Oh, it's a party for your brother." And he gets upset. And he goes to his dad and he says, "Hey, I've been here all these years. I've been so faithful to you. And you didn't so much as kill a goat for me." And then we pick up the story. Luke 15, verse 31. "And father said to him, 'Son, you're always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and he was lost and is found.'" Okay, now the key phrase that I want to point out in verse 31 is this: "All I have is yours." So he's saying this to the older brother. Okay? He says, "Yes, you're always with me. All I have is yours." This means that even though the prodigal son comes back and he's restored and he gets the gold ring and he gets the robe and he gets the meal, he does not get a do-over on the inheritance. That belongs to the older brother. Now, I don't know what all happens there, but there's a principle in this. And the principle is that we all who are sons and daughters of God get an inheritance. And God looks at things from an eternal perspective. We look at things temporary, don't we? Because we're temporarily here on the earth. And this is how we see it. This is how we see things. God doesn't see things that way. God sees eternity. And when you were born, you were created, and you were created to live forever. And God gives us everything that we need, every time we need it, not just for now, but for eternity. Okay? Now, so he doesn't get a do-over on that inheritance, and I believe that we can actually draw some of our inheritance. Now, I don't want to get into a bunch of weird stuff, but I think we can draw and we can forfeit some things just by what we do on the earth. And I'm going to show you this. It's in Matthew 25, 4 through 29. And it says this. There's a lot I'm going to read here, so follow with me. "For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them, and made another 5 talents. And likewise he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground, and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came back and settled the accounts with them. So he who had received the 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I've gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, and good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a few things. I'll make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also, who had received 2 talents, came and said, Lord, you delivered me 2 talents, and look, I've gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I'll make you ruler over many. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. Now that's a mouthful. But what I want to focus on here is it's up to us to invest and reinvest what God has given us, and to reinvest it back into the kingdom. 1 Timothy 4:8 says this when we talk about us being eternal beings. 1 Timothy 4:8 says this, and I want you to follow with me on this one. For bodily exercise profits a little, but here's the key, but godliness is profitable for all things, having promise of the life that now is and of that which is to come. There is a connection between the two. Life does not stop. Life may stop here on earth, but life does not stop for us. You understand that? We are eternal beings, all right? Now, like I said before, we tend to look at things from a purely temporary perspective, but God sees us as that eternal being, and the life we live here on earth has eternal consequences. All right, so what is our treasure? What is our treasure? Now, when we think about treasure, a lot of times what we think about is a material aspect of treasure, the material piece of it. But I think there's so much more than just the material, and that's what I want to look at right now. Give me a second here. Okay, so John 14:2 and 3 says this. This is Jesus, and he's talking to his disciples. He says, In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go prepare a place for you, and if I go prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Now, the word mansions is the Greek word monē. Monē. It means dwellings. And so, I've heard it taught, and I don't know if you guys have heard this, but I've heard it taught that we get mansions in heaven, and the more we sow into the kingdom, the bigger the mansion. That might be true. I don't know. I really don't know if that is the way it is. But I do know that there's a place for me. And to me, I think that's the most important thing. There is a place. And if there's a great big mansion, great. I'm good with that. But even if it's just a simple spot for me, I'm okay. And I think you guys will be too once I get a little farther into this, okay? So, all right. So, now, again, not having been to heaven, I really don't know what that looks like. But I would not think that if God cautions us against materialism on earth, that he would decide that that's important in heaven. Does that make sense? All right. So to me, there's something richer at play, and so I want to do this. I want to take a peek into heaven. I want to take a look into heaven. Just open the blinds and peek in, and just see what's going on up there, and maybe that'll help us understand what that treasure might be. Okay? You guys still with me? You guys okay? I know we've been sitting for a while. I'm trying to move real fast. All right. Revelation chapter 4, starting in verse 9. It says, whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever. Okay, so let me back up a second. So this is the throne room of heaven. This is John the Apostle, and he is looking into the throne room of heaven. He's been taken there. He's been instructed to write down everything he sees. So he's looking in the throne room. In the center is the throne, and he who sits on the throne. Who is that? Who is it? Yes, that is our Father. That's Yahweh. That's our Father. All right? So he's watching this, and he's describing what's happening. He says, whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, you are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. Now, who's the 24 elders? Well, I don't know. I don't know who they are. I can speculate, and I've heard speculation. I don't know if anybody really knows who they are. They could be, part of the 12 disciples, right? Could be part of them. I don't know if Judas would be there. Could be prophets of old that are there, right? Could be people we don't even know that are there. But there are 24 elders, and they are in a very high position there in heaven. Now, these guys are probably the ones with the highest rewards in heaven. Not only do they get to sit in the throne room with God, but they have titles of elder, don't they? That's a high position. They have titles of elder in heaven in the throne room of God. Now, just think about that position. Think about that for a second. That's pretty high position. All right? Now, they've also been given crowns. So I'm guessing these crowns are probably far better than anything we've ever seen on the face of the earth. If you hear or if you read heaven described, it's a pretty magnificent place. So a crown in heaven is going to be pretty fabulous. Okay? Now, what do they do with their crowns? They just throw it down, don't they? They throw their crowns down. Now, why do you think they would throw them down? Do you think maybe they throw them down because there's something there that is far more valuable? Right? What do you think would be the most valuable thing? Maybe him who sits on the throne. And maybe the reward is not the crown, maybe it's not the material things, but maybe it is proximity to the throne. I'm not going to build doctrine off of this, but maybe, just maybe, it's proximity to the throne, because these guys are in the throne room. And maybe the higher reward, the closer you get to him. I don't know. I don't know how it works. But it seems to me like these guys don't care one bit about the crown on their head. In fact, they gladly lay it at his feet. And I got a feeling that when we get to heaven, it's going to look a whole lot like that. I got a feeling that we're not going to really care about what kind of mansion there is. Because what I envision is an opportunity to really, truly be in the actual presence of God. We've had some good worship here on earth. You know, as a musician, I've been involved in a lot of worship services. And we've had some great ones. We've had some where everybody just stops playing altogether and just bask in the presence of God. But you know what? That pales into comparison to what's in store. And I believe that when we're talking about treasure in heaven, I believe that treasure is God himself. And I believe that there is a closeness that we can attain there just by working to get closer to him here on earth. And maybe it all starts with intimacy. See, one thing I never talked about, and I want you to catch this, when I talked about laying up treasure in heaven, I never talked about you have to go to church every Sunday, and you have to donate so much, and you have to give so many hours. And the reason why is because that's works. That's legalism, and I don't ever want you guys to get into legalism. So we don't want to do that to get close to God. You know what we do to get close to God? We just get close to God. And then everything else becomes an outgrowth of that. We don't have to force fruit. We don't have to do that. We don't have to grab fruit and stick it to things and say, look at the fruit I'm bearing. We just get close to God and we abide in him, and the fruit takes care of itself. And I believe this eternal God that sees these eternal beings is wanting to build on that. And our closeness to him is how we lay up that treasure in heaven. Does that make sense to anybody here?